Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Sports Insider. Shout out to Crosby Fan 87. We are starting right now. I'm Dan Labbe, he's Chris Fedor. Joe Vardon, right over there, he's our first guest. We're also going to have Mary Kay Cabot on to talk Browns, of course. It's almost baseball time, guys. Almost. Paul Hoynes is going to join us. It is April, though. NBA playoffs start this month.
Yep.
NFL draft starts April 30th. Indians open on Monday, so it's a busy time. And Joe, as we look ahead to the playoffs, do you feel like this team is ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they were ready probably about 7 to 10 days ago. And now it's almost like they're stuck in kind of almost like a no man's land because they're ready. They're the second seed. I don't think they can get any better in this regular season, but there are still now 13 days left to go before they can actually be in the playoffs. So, yeah, they're ready to go. They just need the calendar to catch up.
When it comes to this team, Joe, a lot of conversation is about the relationship between LeBron James and David Blatt. Right. LeBron has talked about his role in the offense and how much freedom he has to call plays.
Yeah.
How big of a deal is it that LeBron is calling some plays, calling some sets?
It's not a deal at all. It happens on virtually every team across the league. LeBron said this morning that he has called plays for 11 of his 12 years in the league. Not to mention Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers. Like in football, you know, in basketball, Chris Paul calls plays, Dwayne Wade calls plays. It's this is not. I'll say it this way. There was a time when there was a LeBron and David Blatt dynamic that was not good. Mm-hmm. That has kind of gone away. It may come back again someday. It may not. Maybe it depends on what happens come playoff time. But I'm telling you, this play calling thing is not it. Whether there was a great relationship there or not, LeBron James should be calling plays sometimes when the ball's in his hands. He's the best player in the league. Why wouldn't you want him calling plays?
You mentioned the relationship between David and LeBron. Mm-hmm. What is that relationship like?
Well, I think now it's more open, certainly more open than it was. LeBron, when he came back from his 2 weeks off, came back a more open-minded player, a player more at ease with allowing David to have the kind of influence and impact that a coach should have on the team. I think LeBron took down some barriers that he had put up or that were just there organically when the season began. So it's better. The dialogue is much more fluent and flowing between those two than it was. And it's something that you can see both during games and at practice.
When we talk about relationships, obviously there's the LeBron-Kyrie relationship as well. And that's a big one because Kyrie's under contract for a long time. Yeah. LeBron, you think, is going to be here for a long time. That's the plan. So those two are really key to this team's long-term success. That relationship has evolved kind of from game one to now. Talk about that a little bit.
Right, and it struck me as I was having conversations with both LeBron and Kyrie about their relationship over the last week, because of where we are right now with LeBron and Kevin Love. That relationship is obviously awkward. It obviously hasn't grown off the court, and even on the court, you know, there are nights when it looks like they fit, there are nights when it looks like it doesn't. And it struck me because when the season began, that is where LeBron and Kyrie were. It really was. I mean, Kyrie came into this knowing how great of a player LeBron was and knowing the kind of aura that is around him and the respect that LeBron deserves, but also knowing that he had skills. LeBron knew he had the skills, but he also didn't like the way Kyrie used those skills. And there was a butting of heads, and it took a long time for Kyrie to understand what it was that LeBron wanted from him, but also for LeBron to understand that Kyrie had gifts that were beyond your normal point guard, to the point where LeBron actually changed how he played or how he thought he would play this year to better fit what Kyrie brought to the table.
It's funny that you bring up just the moments that we point to during a season. I remember when LeBron was in Miami for the first time in 2010, the moment that seemed like galvanized Miami was coming here to Cleveland and LeBron's teammates having his back and winning that game and just rallying around him. Was there one of those kinds of moments with Kyrie and LeBron that you can point to and say that's when everything changed, or was it just a culmination?
Well, I think if I had to pick, I would say it's more of a culmination, but there are two things that come to mind. One is the one that Kyrie told us about for our story, which was the morning of the Los Angeles game. You know, the roof was on fire. David Blatt was really in hot water.
Is this at the bowling alley?
This is the day after the bowling alley. The team had lost 6 in a row. The buzzards were circling, and while David was actually taking all sorts of heat from the media in a scrum, LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin were off to the side, and LeBron was basically opening up to them like, look, you know, I trust you guys enough that the three of us need to take control of this thing. And they did. Now, since that point, Kyrie has kind of asserted himself more and taken more advantage of that opportunity than Kevin has. So that's one thing. But then a second moment really was that 55-point outburst that Kyrie had against Portland when LeBron was hurt. Because the Cavs lose that game. They had always lost that game, at least this year without LeBron. And Kyrie comes out and plays a different kind of game than LeBron probably even suspected that Kyrie could play. And LeBron, as a spectator, saw that and said, wow, this really impressed me. And so I think those two moments are the moments you can point to from a LeBron-Kyrie perspective to say this is how they came together.
The counter to all of this talk about the relationships on this team, and someone in the comments brings it up, is that it's a little overblown when we sit down and analyze that stuff. But at the same time, it's an 82-game season. When you get in the playoffs, it's 2 months under a magnifying glass that just gets bigger and bigger the deeper you go. How much do those relationships matter over the course of a year?
They matter more in this sport than certainly any other sport that the commenter likes. In football, you know, you need to be on the same page for 4 seconds at a time, 4 to 7 seconds at a time before the whistle blows. In baseball, you know, if you have a hot pitcher that day, regardless of what page you're on, that's really all that matters. In basketball, it's the most free-flowing, most continuity-based game that we have. And so being on the same page and having a certain level of trust matters. And the level of trust on the floor is what's important. But some of what goes into that trust in the game is how you feel about a guy off the court. Now, you don't have to be best friends, and that's the point everybody's trying to make, and that's fine. But you also can't necessarily be at each other's throats. And no one's really saying that that's what's going on with LeBron and Kevin. But the more that they come to understand one another away from basketball, the more that'll help on the floor.
Right. I mean, I think there's also a point here that this Cavs team is not like San Antonio. It's not like Oklahoma City. It's not like Miami. Every team in the NBA is going to be built differently, and every team in the NBA is going to operate differently. LeBron wants this team to be like a family. That's his goal. He's the most powerful person in this organization. You can argue that he's one of the most powerful people in all of sports. So if he wants this thing to be like a family, then yes, I do think relationships off the court, on the court, in the locker room, I think all those things are going to matter, especially to the biggest voice in the organization.
All right. Lots of Cavs talk to have. We haven't even gotten to the playoffs yet. So it's going to be fun between now and, we hope, mid-June.
Absolutely.
Joe Vardon, Cavaliers LeBron reporter here at Northeast Ohio Media Group. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
And Chris, you know, I brought it up, that 2-month playoff grind.
Yeah.
That Kyrie and Kevin love. There's not another sport where you have to do that.
Right.
I mean, in football, it's a month. In baseball, it's a month.
Yep.
In the NBA, you're playing 7-game series, 7-game series, 7-game series. I mean, I guess if you want to say hockey, obviously, that's the other one. But of the big three, basketball is completely unique in that sense.
And it's so funny that you bring that up, because if you remember last year when Miami lost against San Antonio, there was almost a sense of relief in that locker room in Miami because they had been through it.
Yeah.
It was the 4th straight year that they got to the NBA Finals, and that grind and all of the pressure and all of those kinds of minutes and being underneath the microscope for 4 straight years, it was almost like, oh, we can finally exhale now. Chris Bosh said it. He said, we weren't having fun here as we were going through this for the 4th straight year. And you do still want basketball to be fun. It's still supposed to be a game, and you have to enjoy winning as much as you enjoy the grind of the game, too.
It's a whole nother season, the playoffs are in the NBA. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's talk to a team that doesn't get to play a lot of playoff games. The Browns, our Browns beat reporter Mary Kay Cabot joins us. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm fine, guys. How you doing?
We're doing well. Mary Kay, the punishment for Ray Farmer, it has come down. Is it less severe than you expected?
It really is less severe than I expected. I had originally heard that they were thinking about docking the Browns a draft pick, and it was to be a mid-round pick, somewhere around the 4th round. I believe that it would have probably been a 4th rounder. But as they went through their investigation, I do think that they came to the conclusion that he acted completely alone. No one else knew about this, and he was expressing frustration. These were opinions. This was nothing that gave the Browns a competitive advantage. So I think in the end they went a little bit easier on them than they were going to. Now, when I look at the big picture, however, I think that there should have been more disparity between the Falcons' sanctions and the Browns, because these guys were pumping crowd noise in for 2 years, and that was designed to give them a competitive advantage. So to only get fined $100,000 more than the Browns and a 5th-round pick, I really don't think that was very much.
Mary Kay, when you talk about this punishment for the Browns, it means Ray Farmer is not going to be there for 4 games of the regular season. I look at it and say, well, for a general manager's perspective, where he makes his money, where he's most important is this time right now. It's the draft, it's free agency, it's during training camp, things like that. So what's it going to mean for the Browns and how they operate to not have Ray for the first 4 games of the regular season? Is it going to be a big deal at all?
I really don't think so. Again, if they had started the suspension now, which they did with Rich McKay, the president of the Falcons, who is on the competition committee, they started his competition committee 3-month suspension on April 1st. If they had done that to Ray Farmer, it would have been very, very difficult for the Browns to get through this next month without him. During the draft, they've got obviously 10 picks, 2 in the first round, and that would have really, really hurt them for him not to be able to make those decisions. So I think they gave him and the Browns a tremendous break in that regard. In addition to that, he will be around for the cut down to 75. He'll be around for the cut to, for the cuts to 53, and he will, be able to kind of see what shakes loose from other teams' rosters before he goes on his suspension. So I really think this was a little bit of a slap on the wrist. That first month, they've got other capable guys that can fill in. The only thing that I think, they won't be able to do, that he won't be able to do, is to acquire players in that month, and also to keep his eyes out for trade possibilities, because the trading window is still open at that time. So, that can hurt them a little bit. But for the most part, this was really nothing.
Mary Kay, in all of this, is it really believable that Jimmy Haslam had no idea what was going on, that Ray Farmer really acted alone here?
You know what, I do believe so, because first of all, they do not sit together at home games. I don't believe that Ray was doing this, in the presence of Jimmy Haslam. I think Jimmy knows right now that he has to be really careful with everything, being under investigation with Pilot Flying J and all of that. I don't think that he would tolerate any wrongdoing in the Browns. So I really do think that Ray acted alone. And again, I think that was another reason why they went a little easy on him. I also think that the NFL recognizes that the Browns are only going into the 2nd year of a new head coach, a new general manager, and really strong sanctions could cripple a team that's really trying hard to get off the ground. Jimmy's a new owner. Everyone's kind of new in their role, and I think that Roger Goodell and the NFL, I think they realized, we can't do anything that's, going to cause the house of cards here to sort of fall. So I think they took all of that into consideration.
Mary Kay, we're about a month away from the NFL draft. We're a couple of weeks away from Johnny Manziel leaving rehab. When it comes to Johnny and the organization's view on him, are they more concerned about the off-the-field stuff and whether he can get his life together, or do you think their concerns with Johnny are about on the football field and how he played in the 6 quarters?
You know what? I would have to say both. I think there has to be concern about both, and I believe that there is. I think there are some people in the organization that still, and Ray Farmer is one of them, that still truly believe that Johnny Manziel can succeed at this level in the right situation. And, in talking to him at the owners' meeting, he feels that when Johnny was thrown in there, they did things so differently that it threw everyone off. That not only was Johnny knew what he was doing, but everyone, the skill players, the offensive line, everyone was a little bit rattled by the drastic change. So, he thinks that if they do, the play action, run-oriented scheme with a really great defense to support them, that he can be successful. You know what? We will have to see, who really knows. I do think they still need to add some weapons. They need to get a tight end. They need to get a good receiver in here. Another one. I mean, just because you got Dwayne Bowe and Brian Hartline, I just don't think you can stop there. You need a good blue chip first or second round receiver out of this draft.
Mary Kay, you mentioned that they need to get more offensive weapons. As I kind of look through mock drafts, and of course Tom Reed's mock draft today, I'm seeing Danny Shelton. A lot of buzz for him at number 12. Is that really the direction the Browns would go if they kept that pick?
You know what? I could see them doing that. I don't know if they will, but I could definitely see them doing that because, you want to be able to. First of all, they have to stop the run. They were 32nd against the run last year, and this is a player who makes big impact plays. He had a lot of tackles for loss. I think 16.5 last year, and 9.5 sacks. So if you can affect the quarterback, those are the kind of positions that you really value very high in the draft like that. So I think that would be a good pick for them if they decide not to try to trade up for Mariota or if they decide not to go with a receiver there.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter, joining us on Sports Insider. Mary Kay, thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Danny Shelton.
Oh, my goodness.
Because I haven't gotten to pick your brain a lot about the draft yet. Danny Shelton, go.
I mean, I don't understand why the Browns are going to continue to invest so many resources on the defensive side of the ball and just continue to ignore offense. It's been like this, Dan, for like the last 3 years. If you go back to free agency a couple years ago, who did they spend the big money on? Paul Kruger and Desmond Bryant, defensive guys, right? If you go back, top 10 picks, how many of those are you going to use on the defense before you address your offense? You have to be able to score. And the Browns' offense was in the conversation last year with the Oakland Raiders, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can't win that way in the NFL right now. You can't. The defense had 2 touchdowns against the Indianapolis Colts last year, and they still found a way to lose that game. So they continue to use these top 10 picks and top 15 picks on defensive guys and spending a majority of their money in free agency on the defense. It's not going to matter until you figure out the offense, and the reality is you're going into this year with either Josh McCown or Johnny Manziel as your starting quarterback. The bottom line is, if they're going to have any success at all, they're going to need help. That means running back, that means offensive line, that means wide receiver, that means tight end. So I am so sick and tired of hearing about Danny Shelton from Washington for this team in the first round. They have to score touchdowns. That should be the number 1 goal for this team.
There you have it. Not an endorsement for Danny Shelton, number 12.
And he's a good player. Tough, physical dude. He's going to help you stop the run, but he's going to play on 2 downs. He's going to play first and second down. He's going to come off the field on 3rd down. How about some touchdowns? Is that too much to ask?
I would take that.
Okay.
All right, let's talk Indians. Almost there. Corey Kluber almost ready to take the mound in Houston and get the season started. We're joined by part of our Indians team, Zack Meisel. Zack, how are you?
Not too bad, guys. How's it going?
Good. Zach.
How do you feel about Danny Shelton, Zach?
All you have to say is Josh McCown or Johnny Manziel is going to be the quarterback, and I think any conversation ends there.
Zach, you look at surprises from spring training, and maybe one of the biggest ones is Zack McAllister. This is a guy that came to camp. No one was really sure where he would fit. Next thing you know, he's in the rotation.
Yeah, I think in today's day and age, we're so quick to write people off. And if you remember a year ago, he entered the season as the number 3 starter, and he was coming off 2 pretty good years in the starting rotation. So I think just because he looked really good in the bullpen in September, a lot of people said Well, he's going to be on the team no matter what because he's out of options. So I think the Indians would be better suited if he's in the bullpen and Danny Salazar and T.J. House round out that rotation. So he was kind of written off from the beginning, but he wanted to be in that rotation. He strongly prefers that than being in the bullpen, not knowing when you're going to pitch or how long you're going to pitch. So he kind of took it into his own hands, and he had some help with Salazar's struggles. But I think the Indians are excited about what he can provide in the rotation, and the benefit they have is they only need him to make a couple of starts in the first month of the season because of the schedule. So they'll have time to kind of figure out what exactly they want to do moving forward and whether he's the answer in that rotation.
Obviously, this is a setback for Danny Salazar, Zach. This is a guy who a couple of years ago was pitching in big games. He was supposed to be the next big thing in the Indians starting rotation, and now he's starting this year in the minors. How do the Indians view him big picture?
I think they like his potential, and how can you not when you have a guy who throws 98 miles an hour? You can always find a role for a guy like that, no matter how much he struggles with his command, with the mental aspect of the game. With Salazar, it's kind of similar to how Carlos Carrasco was last year, in that Carrasco didn't really figure things out as a starter until he got his routine down, something that made him comfortable. He liked throwing from the stretch. He liked a very limited pregame warm-up routine. He likes just kind of getting in there and letting it go from the start. And so Salazar's going to have to figure out what works for him. He's going to have to find a routine that he can really attack for every 5 days. And it's not just the day he's taking the mound. It's really the days away from the mound. And what are you doing to prepare yourself? And how are you getting mentally prepared for your next start? And how are you going and attacking these hitters and learning their tendencies and learning what pitches you need to throw to them at what times and why you're throwing those pitches? It's a lot of the mental stuff, because he can go down to AAA and he can blow guys away with that 97-mile-an-hour heat, and he's not really going to learn much. But they need him to come back at some point and understand really the mental side of pitching. And that's in talking to Mickey Callaway, that's the toughest part for a kid his age to learn. And that's what separates kids. You see so many guys who can throw as hard as they possibly can, and they don't make it because they never really grasp, the intricacies of pitching. And I think that's really the last step for him if he's going to make it in the big leagues.
Zach, we mentioned Zack McAllister. You mentioned Carlos Carrasco. Corey Kluber is a guy that took a little while to kind of put it together. Is it sort of important to remember those guys and remember that Salazar is still a young guy, and even though he started that playoff game a few years ago, it can still take time?
Yeah, and the longer you're in the league, the more opportunity the opposition has to get to know you, figure out how to hit you. It's not – rarely are you going to make it up to the big leagues like Salazar did his first year and not hit that wall at some point and have to reassess and figure things out. And, I think the Indians are hoping that Kluber's already past that. I think they're hoping McAllister is now past that. We'll see with Salazar. I think it's tough because every individual is so different, and you never know who's going to blossom when that light bulb is going to click for each pitcher. Kluber is 29 years old, and this guy is just now entering his prime, and he's only been in the league for 2 years. So everyone is different, and I think with Salazar, a lot of that was he came up in 2013. He really didn't know any better, and he got by on his stuff. And now hitters get accustomed to that. They start to learn him better. They figure him out. There's a video that they can watch of him, and it's not so easy anymore. You have to make adjustments, and I think he's really going through this. He went through it for the first time last year, and now it's, okay, where's that progress?
Zach, it was a couple of years ago when the Indians spent big in free agency, bringing in Nick Swisher, bringing in Michael Bourn. I feel like Michael Bourne's kind of flying under the radar. He's getting overlooked here. What are the Indians expecting from him this year, coming off the season that he had last year, dealing with the injuries?
I don't think you're ever going to see the guy who stole 50, 60 bases a season in the National League. But the Indians are hoping that certainly his confidence is back. He worked with the trainer in Houston all offseason. I think what they're really hoping for is if he can get on base at a higher rate. He's been getting on base at about a 315 clip the last 2 years, which is just that's not going to cut it for a leadoff hitter. But if he can get on base at a 340, 345 clip, and he's been doing that this spring. I think his on-base percentage is about 400. That's going to open up more opportunities for him, maybe to get from first to third on a single, to take an extra base when it's possible. If he can steal 20 bases, I think they're fine with that. As long as he's on base more, that'll give him more opportunities. And when you look at the middle of the lineup and you see Brantley, Santana, Moss in there now, Jan Gomes, that's a pretty formidable middle of the order. They need the guys in the 1 and 2 spots to get on base more than anything. And so I think that's what they're hoping for from Michael Bourn. And he's hit the ball really well this spring, so I think they're encouraged.
All right, Zack Meisel joining us on Sports Insider. Indians open things up next week. Of course, their home opener is next Friday. Lots of buzz building about the Indians. Zack, thanks for the time.
Not a problem, guys. Thank you.
All right, time for Bud Shaw.
Thanks, guys. You know, the big story this week in Cleveland sports is also the biggest non-story. And that hasn't stopped it from becoming the talk of the town. Just this morning, I heard a 60-year-old woman in a coffee shop ask her friend, "Who's running the show?" She meant David Blatt or LeBron James, not, as you might have expected, Dan Labbe or Chris Fedor. LeBron James calling offensive sets and Blatt repeating the calls to the rest of the team came from a Brian Windhorst podcast. So our first comment from Damage 450, not unexpectedly, bashes the media, asking, is there a more dishonest group of people than reporters? Well, I'd like to think there is. In fact, Wall Street is full of them. You could look it up on your smartphone or laptop if you still have money to afford that after the mortgage loan crisis crippled the economy. Let's not paint with such a broad brush, Damage, if I can call you Damage. Sliming the entire media, well, there is a word for that, and I think the word is dishonest. On the same topic, sorry about that. You can stop distracting me, you two. On the same topic, Ed in Naples gets the award for being the first commenter to put the LeBron Blatt story in a football context, which is always something you have to do in this town. He says, doesn't Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have the authority to call plays? Before adding, and in Cleveland, it's Ray Farmer. Here's the rule. If you can't make Ray Farmer the punchline to every Cleveland sports story in town this week, you're just not trying. Let me see. Stop it, you guys. You're doing it again to me. Okay. Despite the bad publicity hounding the Browns, Buckeyes head coach Urban Meyer stepped up to call the Browns' pre-draft scouting regimen fantastic. Apparently, he's impressed by their due diligence. When pressed, one cleveland.com reader tells us, Urban must have said, April Fools. Look, I'm not sure what would make Browns fans feel better these days, that the team was operating at the height of its due diligence when it picked Johnny Manziel and Justin Gilbert, or that it simply Ray Farmer blindfolded himself and picked two names out of a hat. I think either one is plausible. And finally, the NCAA Regional has come and gone. The appearance of the Wichita State Shockers and their mascot prompted this separated at birth from reader Jim Corrigan. Well, I don't know. I see a resemblance. I'm not sure Josh McCown reminds me of Woo Shock, though, as much as he reminds me of, say, Luke McCown and the other 21 starters who've called signals for the Browns since 1999. Hey, I have an idea. In 2015, for the Browns and the Cavaliers, we could do worse than have LeBron James call the plays. Guys?
Yeah, Bud, I heard somebody make this point.
First of all, what'd you think of the Dan Labbe, Chris Fedor line?
I like that.
Pretty good?
That was well done,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, very
That
nice.
was before I started stumbling over everything I tried to say. Go ahead.
So I heard this point on a podcast I listened to. I
Yeah.
believe it was from Andre Knott, a guy a lot of people might know, who was actually an Indian sideline reporter.
Yeah.
And he mentioned there's a lot that Jimmy Haslam seems to not know about between the Browns and Ray Farmer texting and Pilot Flying J. This guy seems to not know about a lot of things.
I think Mary Kay's comment that they don't watch home games in the same booth, I think is legitimate.
Yeah.
They don't. I could see where Haslam could assume that Farmer, when they do watch games together on the road, that Farmer's sitting there texting, other GMs about possible personnel matters. But what I still can't get over is when asked if he inquired as to the content of those text messages, Haslam said no. Well, why? Why wouldn't you? If you knew nothing about it and now you knew you were under investigation by the league, why wouldn't you ask your GM what he was texting about? Especially with the prospect of it maybe it being a competitive advantage. It turns out the league didn't believe it was, which is why they got what they got.
I mean, I feel like the NFL, guys, has kind of set this precedent where the less you know, the better it is for you. And maybe Jimmy was like, I'm not going to ask because I don't want to know. In this way, I can just deny. The guys that continue to get hit with these suspensions are the ones that are linked to it, or there's evidence that they're linked to it.
Well, the one thing I'll say, when I hear Mary Kay and others say that this was a slap on the wrist, I don't necessarily believe that. It's not that I think it was a sledgehammer. I don't. But it would have been a very arbitrary thing based on something that happened last season and it's taken how long to, quote, investigate, to suspend Ray Farmer for the draft. I mean,
Yeah.
on what grounds could they possibly have done that? So the infraction happened in game, in season. So I think it's only right that the suspension happens in season. So I think it would have gone the other way. I think people would have been really up in arms if just because they came to their conclusion last week that then for the next month Ray Farmer's gone. I mean, that would have been very unfair.
Or they would have been excited because that means Ray wouldn't have been.
I've got 1,000 emails from people saying, you know, what kind of if they really wanted to punish the Browns, they'd give them more draft picks and let Ray make more picks. But anyway.
All right, it's Bud Shaw. Any reports of him calling plays or calling timeouts from the bench overriding one of us are completely untrue and false. Thanks, Bud. Thanks, Mary Kay Cabot, Zack Meisel, and of course Joe Vardon, who talked Cavs with us earlier. If you missed any of it, full archive will be up at cleveland.com/sports. He's Chris Fedor. I'm Dan Labbe.